I'll leave it a couple of minutes. Hello and welcome LinkedIn to our fireside chat on defining what technology adoption means personally and professionally. My name's Natasha Bradley and I'm so happy to be joined by Dawn. Dawn, can you introduce yourself please?
Yes, thanks, Natasha. I'm Dawn Greaves. I'm Associate Director of Digital Transformation at Leeds Community Healthcare NHS Trust. I've worked in the NHS for about 31 years and about 25 years in digital health, so quite a wide range in experience.
Wow, amazing. And thank you very much for being here. It's much appreciated. So, Dawn, let's start at the beginning. Technology adoption is a word, that comes across many industries and it means many different things to many different people. So I think it's a good place to start. What does technology adoption mean to you?
Well, I think it's more of a series of events and activities that you need to follow to ensure that technology is successfully adopted. Mm-hmm. So it would start with things like raising awareness. So what's the vision? What are we trying to achieve? And what's the problem we're trying to solve? Bringing people along that journey so they've got a clear understanding of what you're looking to achieve, how it's going to improve things for themselves. So not just the organisation, but what does it actually mean to me as a staff member? What's it going to mean to my patients? So really being clear and articulating that vision and making sure people have got opportunity to input. So I think the raising awareness is a really good way to get it started right from the outset, but then you need to be careful about keeping those messages flowing so you keep people involved throughout the process. And then there's things like letting people have a play with it. You might do some testing with users, you might pilot the product so they can actually see what does it look and feel like, how is it going to be different. There'll be lots of things around process change, so it's not just about bringing a technology in on top of a current process. How do we want to work differently, and redesigning the way that we work so that the technology works to its optimum. It's not having to adopt to work around our processes that may not be fit for purpose in a digital environment. So making sure that we can understand what the bigger benefits are going to be by implementing those changes in processes and technology. And then moving on to adoption. So, you'll do pilots, you'll do testing, but we need to get this into a live environment so that we can then scale it out to all the services that need to do it, but in a logical way, in a way that makes people feel comfortable, but that we're confident that it's working well as well. And then the last thing is around how you move to that integrated business as usual environment. We don't just go live on day one and switch off the project on day two. We need to make sure that the staff are well engaged, well utilising it, are achieving the benefits that we set out to do. So there's something around the here and now of that go live and making sure it's well embedded. But there's also something about in weeks or months reassessing to make sure we've achieved that vision, achieved those benefits, and that it is actually business as usual. People are not reverting back to previous ways of working and it's well embedded. You might even look at closing down legacy systems at that point if you had something to start with. But it's that logical process of how we take something from an idea's conception right through to it's business as usual now and people are using it well.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And I think you summed it up really well because, when someone asks me that sort of question, I sort of say it's not just about deploying technology, it's about embedding that meaningfully to people in the ways that are working. But you summed it up a lot better than I could.
Well, we always talk about technology, but actually technology is the easy part.
It is, yeah.
It's getting the people and the processes right that's the key thing to making it a success, I think. And we can often forget that when we're bringing in new pieces of technology.
Yeah, and I think you think how many pieces of technology across the trust, across the whole system that have gone on the shelf because they thought the technology wasn't the right fit, it didn't work, it was a failure. But most of the time, it's because the adoption of that technology wasn't done correctly and that solution wasn't embedded. So it'd be good really for you to give an example of a successful technology program that you've delivered, the good, but also the bad, because I think that's where people will actually learn from.
Yeah, well, the one I'm going to talk to you about today it's a fairly recent implementation that we've just gone live with on the 14th of March,
Oh,
sorry,
fab.
14th of May.
Okay.
So
Wow.
hot off the press. So we do a lot of work across Leeds City as a whole. So we're just one organisation in the mix of what happens across Leeds City. But we've been doing some work around a home first approach. So how can we deliver more care at home, getting people out of hospital when they don't need to reside there and back into their own home with the right level of support. So as part of that work, we've been looking at active recovery, and we piloted a joint triage hub that staff from community services and from social care based in the hospital in a single office, looking at how we can, who's ready to be discharged and what support can we put in place. And we're jointly triaging those patients so we know we get the right level of care at the right point in time. So that's been working really well, and we piloted it in one of our neighbourhood teams, and it's been so successful that we've realised we need to roll this out across the whole of Leeds City. But on its own, just as a manual process, it's not really fully effective. So we've got staff in our community staff in the hospital that are accessing 3 different IT systems. So we're looking at the hospital electronic patient record, who's right for discharge, what do we need to do? We might register them in community services, so we'll register them on our electronic patient record as a patient and do the work we need to do. We might even refer them into social care, so that same person is registering that patient on the social care system. So that's not an effective way that we can continue. And then we've got staff working in different ways. So if our community staff go out to see the patient, they'll record that information in our electronic patient record, and in social care, they generally don't use IT. They're writing in paper records that are left in the patient's home. So anyone that comes to visit has got that handwritten notes. And there's a basic summary that goes into the council system, but that's generally done by the admin staff, not necessarily the social care staff that are out and about. So what we were tasked with doing is bringing in a single care record that both teams could access for a shared care plan. So at any point in time, we know exactly what's happening and who's responsible for that level of care. So we looked at a few different options, but we were very conscious of not having staff dual entering into systems. We wanted to make it as straightforward as easy as possible, particularly as there was a big cohort of staff that weren't used to using IT in their work environment. That's not to say they couldn't use IT, they just weren't used to working in that environment. So we were having to give them laptops as a starting point. How do you use that out and about in a community environment when you've not got anywhere to plug in? You might not have any Wi-Fi. So there's lots of different things, challenges to get over before they even get to see a patient. So lots of implications. We wanted to try and make it as easy as possible. So we chose to set up a single System 1 unit. So we use System 1 as our electronic patient record in community services. There are other EPR providers out there. But that's the one that we use. And also, I think there's probably about 95% of GP practices across Leeds also use System 1. So we set up a brand new unit that was specific for active recovery. And we've given access to our internal neighbourhood teams and the council staff to that single unit. But we had to design it from scratch. So we've been working for quite a long time with the teams to look at what would a new process work that was integrated. How can we streamline our existing processes so it's more efficient, more effective? So we've spent a lot of time doing that, designed the system itself, and then we've had to set up information flows then from System 1 into the council system. So that's removing the need for staff to dual enter. Everything's entered into System 1 once, and then it goes into the council system at the appropriate time for their reporting and their payment methodologies. So it's been a joint effort between the council and the community staff, but it is a success, and we believe it's one of the only shared care records for council, not shared care record, that's probably the wrong terminology, shared care plan across community social care across the country. We don't think there's a lot of them out there. So actually it's a really good success. It did have some niggles. So, some of the things that we've learned from that is around the training approach that we take. There's no one size fits all. with a lot of staff to train in a short period of time. I think there was about 120 council staff as part of that. So some of those, as I said, have not used technology. Most of them have never used System 1. So we can't physically train every single member of staff. So we did put on some physical training sessions where people came to us. We did some basic literacy training for those that needed it as well. And it's been a partnership model between the council and our staff as well. So the council have done a lot of that basic literacy training. They run a whole digital inclusion campaign for citizens across Leeds Council. So they were really in a really good place to help with that. But from a System 1 perspective, we've done some classroom training, which seems to have been the most effective. We've done some e-learning, which has been a little bit hit and miss. We all know not everybody learns that way. So I think we need to offer a balance. That's been a really big learning curve for us to make sure we get the right training for the right groups of staff. And maybe we'll look at how we chunk it down into smaller sessions. So the sessions were quite intensive. The physical sessions, I think they were 2 to 3 hours. It's a lot to get through.
A lot. Yeah.
It is. When it's not your usual way of working, you're not used to using IT. So yeah, I think there's lessons we can learn there. The reporting requirements was another one that's caused us some problems. So we knew we had to do this data flow, and we'd done some work early on to understand what the reporting requirements were, but we couldn't set up any of the data flow until the system was fully operational. So we had to design it first, get it to where we thought it needed to be. But then at the point where we started working on the data flows, we've had to do lots of tweaks to it. We've not understand all the reporting requirements, so we knew what needed to go into the council system, but there was there's an active recovery dashboard that the city used to understand the capacity and capability that's in the system. We hadn't factored that in. So I think understanding the data requirements right at the outset is really key, because we hadn't left enough time to allow us to develop what we needed to do. So it did end up delaying our go live, which then causes a knock-on problem to the training that you've already started delivering. So staff might have had training 6 weeks before they went live rather than 4 weeks, which is what we were aiming for instance. So it causes lots of problems at that point. I think the other thing that I'd pull up about maybe what didn't go as well as we'd initially planned was around go live support, because this is a group of people that are not sat in an office. They're out and about in community services. So we had provided some minimal on-site support in the triage hub, and we brought all the coordinators together into one hub so that we could support them collectively. We hadn't really made any allowances for staff that were going into people's homes that maybe needed some support that way. So I think if we were doing that differently, we might look at things like whether we were offering virtual support, so maybe they could jump on a Teams call and get some support, or even have people that can go out and shadow the staff, so they're just there. We did only bring it in initially for new patients, so it's not that every single patient on day one needed to use the system. It was only new patients, so we could have done that for the first few weeks, and I think we would definitely do that differently. We did end up bringing more online go live support in, and for a longer period, just to support the staff to make sure that they were happy with that, and we're just starting to phase that out a little bit now so we can move more to business as usual. But yeah, I think those were the big issues that maybe didn't quite go as well as we'd thought. So it felt bumpy a little bit for go live, but it feels like we're coming out of the hard work now.
And the value that you've delivered, I know it's only been a short period of time since you've go live, but the value that you've delivered and will continue to deliver will make all that worthwhile.
Absolutely. And you know, there was some negativity, obviously, because it's a new process, but I think staff do realise now the difference that it's making by having access to all that information. From a reporting perspective, we've got much better clarity on who's responsible for each patient. That flow of patients between the two services is more streamlined as well, because it's all in one system.
Have you done any sort of cost realizations, benefit sort of realization at the moment?
Not from the single care record. They had done in terms of the work that they piloted by bringing the teams together. We need to reassess that now that we've got the system live.
Yeah, and I wondered if you'd spoken to any sort of your staff within the community just to get their feeling of how they felt. about the change?
Yeah, I think it's been mixed. There are some people that do appreciate how easy it is, particularly in the triage hubs. Obviously, as I said, they were using 3 different systems before, so that's got to be an improvement. I think there is some work we need to do on understanding what the staff feel went well and didn't necessarily go as well, so we could learn again. The Home First programme is an ever expanding programme, so this is just one piece of work in the whole host of things that we're wanting to achieve. So we do need to make sure that if we're doing anything further, we make sure we learn from these lessons moving forward. But it's not just a project team's perspective, it needs to be the users on the shop floor that are feeding into that.
Yeah, which will be interesting to get their thoughts on, won't it, and help you move forward into sort of phase 2. You know, for like any sort of technology adoption program, stakeholder buy-in is key. You know, as a stakeholder yourself within the NHS, what do you look for, you know, to ensure that you're bought in?
I think there's a lot around that messaging that I mentioned earlier. I think getting it right, the messaging right at the start, and allowing stakeholders to input into the process. There's going to be a lot of people that just don't want to be involved. They'll just let it happen. But there will be people, either people that are really interested in technology or those that are really against technology. You want both perspectives really into the work that you're doing to make, because if you can convince those people that are not into technology that it's the right thing to do, then the others will come along and they'll help sell the message. So I think there is that thing around how we get the stakeholders engaged in the vision, that they see the benefit for themselves and they can then sell that to their peers. And I think it's not just about how we get the message across in terms of their role, but what the difference it will make for their patients as well. We're all here to deliver patient care, and whilst I don't physically deliver patient care, the work that I do will have a massive impact on people's ability to look after patients. So it's seeing the patient at the centre of everything that we do, and keeping that mindset, I think, is how you bring them along.
Perfect. And, you know, from a stakeholder perspective and everyone involved in any programme, you know, measurement is sort of key. And that's really to be able to show the value back across the system to make sure you're keeping patients at that centric point. So in your experience, what's the best way that you've seen to measure that technology adoption?
I think there's something around, it's not all about measuring things at the end of the program. I think you need to measure at key points throughout. So I think if you're doing this well, you'd probably be surveying staff right at the outset. So how does it feel now working in this pilot environment, having to access 3 different multiple systems with no clarity of who's responsible for each patient? Not that there's no clarity, it's not easy to get the information. And then where do they feel at go live? It's going to be muddy still at go live, and so it's still not going to be all perfect information, but it's really useful to know, has it improved, has it worsened? And then in a few weeks, a few months, what does it feel like there, where the system's well embedded, people understand the process and can start to see the benefits? So there is definitely something around how we gather those stakeholder perspectives on what's happening, whether they feel the benefit. So that's usability of the system, but there is something around the training as well. Are we measuring the effectiveness of that training? We know from what people have told us, some of the training was not as good as others. Have we got that clearly articulated? Can we determine that it's one solution that works better than another, so that we can adapt as we move forward? And I think one thing that we're never good at in the NHS, I don't think, is going back and doing that deep dive review 6 or 12 months after the project. Did we achieve the value that we thought we would? You might not do in every case, and that's fine if you've got justified reasons as to why that's happened. But what we do need to be sure is that we've not made things worse. So once the system is embedded, it should start to achieve benefits. And we need to make sure that we plan that in. It is often difficult because the staff have moved on to different pieces of work, don't always have the time, but we plan our own workload. So we can build that into our processes. It just needs to become part of business as usual. So that's part of every project that we do now. We build an assessment in. We know roughly when we're expecting to achieve benefits. So we can easily put those into our workload to go back and do that. I think more around, we're all in financial constraints at the moment, so proving the value of the technology that we're doing is really important now to justify every spend that we make on digital. We've got to show how that's giving back to the system, whether it's cash releasing or time efficiencies or quality even. It all counts, but we have to be able to measure it and justify what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point about, just don't think when you've moved off a project that it's finished. You do have to go back and just keep monitoring it, because there could be lessons learned, there could be some great wins, there could be some case studies that you can push out to your team to say, look what we achieved, we excelled, or we hit our target. I think it's a really good way of being able to push out a successful message about technology adoption. So we're coming sort of to the end of our sort of chat, and it'd be really good for you to share with the audience your top tip for technology adoption.
Fab. Well, from this, I pulled it from this particular project, but actually it could cover different ones. Yeah. But it's more around how we get the right decision makers in a room to allow us to progress at pace. So we were working across two separate organisations here who all have their own governance, all have their own decision-making forums. We were lucky that we had a Home First programme board who were able to make some of the key decisions for us. But we need to make sure we've got both organisations represented, so we've got equal decision rights in progressing this work. So I think that was a key one for us here. But even in a single organisation, it's making sure you've got the right decision makers in the room, not just delegated people that are covering meetings, for instance. That often stalls things. You need to keep the pace. You've got to have the decision makers. And going back to what I was saying about getting your stakeholders engaged, it's having the right messages going out to people on a fairly regular basis, so you keep that buy-in throughout the programme as well.
Yeah, and I can't thank you enough for your time today. And the story you've shared about the successful triage is amazing, and it will deliver a lot of benefit, not only internally to you guys, but also to patients. So thank you ever so much for sharing, Dawn. It's been great. And thank you ever so much for listening, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.